Hey, what's up? Hello, if you are new here, my name is Kayla and you are watching Kayla's Bookish Vibes. This is going to be my monthly reading wrap up and I'll be sharing with you all the books that I read this month as well as some of the books that I purchased this month. Typically in my monthly reading wrap ups, I also want to share the books that I checked out from my library. Although I didn't check out any physical books from my library this month, I only checked out some books on Libby. So I'll go through those once I tell you what I read for the month. So without further ado, this video should be nice and quick. We'll get into the books that I read this month. We'll start with Getting to Happy by Terry McMillan. I feel like I have talked so much about this book, but I did really enjoy it. I ended up not giving it a star rating because I just couldn't land on a star rating. This is the sequel to Waiting to Exhale, so this is following the same group of ladies only 15 years later. I really enjoyed this book. I realized that I really enjoyed Terry McMillan's writing style and what she has to say when she writes. I have been going on a spree of buying up all of her books. So for my birthday, I did get quite a few Terry McMillan books. I won't be going through all the books that I got for my birthday because technically I didn't purchase those. They were gifted to me. I do have a video up already though, hauling those books as well as showing you all how I keep track of all the books that I own. So if you're interested in that, I will leave it in the cards linked up above. But yes, I read Getting to Happy and I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the gems most of all. I feel like Terry McMillan did an amazing job at showing sisterhood, friendship, but also just talking about things that women at an older age have to deal with. I really enjoyed that and I feel like I took a lot of gems out of this book that I will be saving to use later in life. I really enjoyed this one. Another book that I read was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This was my first Jason Reynolds book and I really enjoyed it. This book is written in verse. I read this in tandem with the audiobook. So this is also a book that I checked out from my library using my Libby app. So I listened to it as I was reading it, which was amazing because Jason Reynolds narrates this book. Last month, I read The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, which is also a YA book in poetry form. And I realized I really like that. And I wanted to read more YA novels in poetry form. So I read 2 this month, and this was one of them. I loved this one. In this one, we are following a young man whose older brother was shot and killed, and he is seeking retribution for that. There is a code of ethic that he has to live by growing up in the streets, and we pretty much just show him struggling with that. He gets on an elevator, and I'll just say it's a long way down to the ground floor on the elevator ride that he's on, and he meets some very interesting characters. So I really enjoyed this one and highly recommend. I also read The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth. I have read quite a few books by Sally Hepworth and she has become an author for me. So I'm trying to work through her backlog. I really enjoyed this one. I don't think I've ever given any of Sally Hepworth's books lower than a 4-star. And this is no different. So Sally Hepworth writes domestic dramas or domestic thrillers. They're not necessarily thrilling. They're usually domestic or family dramas and someone in the book is dead or has died. But I really enjoy how she does a slice of life. She just kind of writes slice of life, but makes it almost kind of eerie. Everything is really relatable for me because she tends to write things about mothers and marriage and just women in general. And I always find something to relate to in her books. The Mother-in-Law, we follow 2 points of view. So we're following the mother-in-law and we're also following the daughter-in-law. And we're just kind of seeing how there's a disconnect between them. But because we see both points of view as the reader, we're able to make those connections. Try to show if we were able to communicate more effectively with one another, how much so many things could be cleared up. And it makes you look at your relationships with a different point of view to try to make sure you're not understanding only your side, but to see that there is another side and that side is as equally important to understand. So I really loved this book. Highly recommend Sally Hepworth in general. All of her books I have read so far have been really great. The next and last physical book that I read this month is Womb City. Now, you're going to see a reading vlog of sorts in my next video, which will be spend a few days with me, where I discuss this book, but I didn't enjoy it. This was really highly anticipated for me. I really thought that I would enjoy this book so much, but I did not. I ended up giving this book 2 stars, and that is because the writing style just didn't click with me. I found it to be very choppy, which made for almost an awkward reading experience. I found myself asking so many times, was this a complete thought? Or in rereading things because I'm did I miss something? But no, that's just literally how the book is written. Also, the world building was very repetitive for me. There were times where the author explained the world of body hopping and how that was very normal in the society in this sci-fi horror novel. Went into detail about who can body hop and who can't body hop and how it works, but she did it so many times. And there were times where she explained it the exact same way over and over. So it just got to be like boring, honestly. Came a point where I just felt like I didn't care what happened at the end of this book anymore. And I almost DNF'd it, but I pushed through. I think I read maybe like the last 30% of this book, maybe like 20% of this book on audio, because I just could no longer read it physically. If I had tried to push through and read this book physically the entire time, I would have DNF'd it. I will say it's not all bad. There is some amazing commentary in this book about womanhood in general, when it comes to being a mother, when it comes to just being a spouse, when it comes to just being a woman in society in general, in the workplace. There were a couple of, I could have highlighted all through this book and tabbed everywhere, but once I realized I wasn't really enjoying like the plot of it, I stopped highlighting it, but I did tab a few. But the author does have a lot of insightful things to say. I just didn't like the story, I guess. And this is a horror novel, like sci-fi horror. So don't miss that part, because I didn't realize that there were horror elements in this, and that was my bad. So when it got to that point, I'm like, am I reading the same story? Because now it feels like we're shifting away from sci-fi and leaning more towards like horror elements, and this is a mixture of both. I didn't mind the horror elements. That's not why I didn't like the book. It was more so just like the writing style and I guess the pacing of the book that didn't do it for me. So those were all the physical books that I read. Now let's consult Goodreads for the books that I read on my Kindle or audiobooks. We'll start with Salt the Water. I read this book. This is another YA book written in verse, I believe. I don't have the physical book to see the format of how it's written, but I believe that it is written in verse because it's tagged as poetry. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I wasn't necessarily into it as much as I was into The Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This one was just okay. It felt like towards the second half of the book, started to get other people's point of view, that if we were going to get those points of view, I would have much rather had them earlier on in the book instead of towards the end. But we are following Cerulean Jean. She is free everywhere except school, where they're known for repeatedly challenging authority. She does have a problem with authority. And as a homeschool mom, while reading this book, I just kept thinking like, this is a child that would really benefit from being homeschooled or schooled in a very like non-traditional environment. It would have been so much better for this child if this were a real child. Obviously this is fiction. But yeah, she does have a problem with authority, and her group of friends just have this idea of life that they want to live. They want to live like off the grid and not by normal societal standards. And there comes a point where something happens to one of her parents and she has to deal with that. She also ends up getting expelled from school because of her problem with authority. I won't say any more because I don't want to ruin the book if you do choose to read it. I will just say though, like the first 50% of this book was good and I really enjoyed where we were going with it. But the last half of this book, I just felt like there was maybe like a gap that I was missing and the transition wasn't done smoothly. So it really felt like I wasn't reading the same book that I was reading in the first half of the book. Check it out if you're interested, but I ended up giving that one 3 stars. The Teacher by Freida McFadden. Now I got this one on Kindle Unlimited and I'm so glad I have you here because I need to vent to someone about this book. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. This was my first Freida McFadden book ever. I've never read from this author, but I do really enjoy thrillers. And if you are big on thrillers, then you know Freida McFadden is a pretty big deal in the thriller community. So I thought, okay, let me give one of her books a try. Trigger warning, this book is literally all about grooming. There is a male teacher who is grooming a female student that he has, and there was a very inappropriate relationship that occurs. I think the subject matter of this book just gave me so much of an ick that there was no way I could have enjoyed it. Writing, good writing, bad writing, what have you, the subject matter of this book just gave me a huge ick. And I wanted to DNF, but I didn't because everyone says that Freida McFadden has like the best twist. So I'm waiting for this McTwist to happen. And when it finally occurs, I'm annoyed. Because it's like I waited all this time for this twist only for you to double down in the trash that you were already giving me. I don't want you guys to think that this is like a diss to Freida McFadden. It's just, I didn't like the subject matter of this book and I felt disgusting reading it. Do not recommend. 2 stars. Now, because I had such a visceral reaction to this book, I wanted to give Freida McFadden another chance with a different book with a different subject matter, because she has so many reviews on Goodreads and they're so overwhelmingly positive. I just thought maybe this just isn't the book for you, but try another one of her books. So I did. I read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden, and I ended up giving that one 3.5. I liked that one way more. I enjoyed the twists way more. To me, there were some pretty predictable spots, but it was pretty good for a popcorn thriller. It was definitely one that you could read in one sitting. It was very fast paced, and I did actually end up listening to that on audio in one day because it was good. So I do want to continue the Housemaid series. I believe there's 2 other books in that series, and I will continue to read that. But The Teacher, hated it. The McTwist in The Teacher was McTrash. Okay. And I have seen so many people speak highly of that book or say that they really enjoyed that book, and I'm just trying to figure out if we read the same book, because the twist in The Teacher didn't even make sense. I'm just like, did you guys not read this book? Because there are points in this book that were made that don't add up with the twist. But I digress. I did not like The Teacher, but I did enjoy The Housemaid, and I will continue reading Freida McFadden's books. Now, the next book that I read on my Kindle was Flames of Wrath by J.L. Campbell. This is a thriller. I really enjoyed this one. I was actually sent this book by Black Odyssey, which is a publishing company, and I really enjoyed this one. So in this one, we are following a young lady who is on vacation in Montego Bay, Jamaica with her friends, and they're having a good time until they're no longer having a good time, and she is assaulted. Honestly, she is jumped by the group of friends that she went to spring break with, and she is left for dead. We then switch over to her mother's point of view. Her mother's name is Geneva, I believe. And Geneva is pissed. Her daughter survived the attack, but she is in a medically induced coma. And Geneva wants anyone and everyone who had a hand in putting her daughter in this bed to pay. The police are not moving fast enough for Geneva, so she uses her skills. She's very tech savvy. She uses her skills to get retribution and payback. For all of the kids who put her child in this bed, she is paying them back, honey. And she does so in very interesting ways. She is a morally great character, which I personally love reading morally great characters, because it's like, am I rooting for you? Am I not? There were definitely points where I was like, yes, ma'am, get them. But then there were also times where I'm just like, okay, let's reel it in. Geneva never reels it in though. So I highly recommend that you read this book. It was so good. I ended up giving it 3.75 stars, and we'll just round that up to a 4. Okay, the next book that I read, and the last book that I read, I believe, is Fallen Grace by Sadiqa Johnson. This was like a novella. Amazon has like this collection of books where they get different authors to write short stories and they put them all together in a collection. I believe the collection as a whole is called Blaze, and then the short story that Sadiqa Johnson wrote is called Fallen Grace. Now, I remember when I went to her book signing this past month, and I'll leave that video linked up above, where I got to meet Sadiqa Johnson and she signed some of my books for my birthday. It was a time. I'll leave that linked up above. But I remember her talking about this book, and so I set myself a little reminder on my phone, and when it came out, I listened to it literally immediately while I was working. It's a little over an hour long, so it's not long at all. But if you read The House of Eve, there is a character in that book named Bubbles. In Fallen Grace, we're following that character Bubbles, literally from like where it left off in The House of Eve. I can't really tell you what happened to her in The House of Eve because I don't want to ruin that story if you haven't read it. But if you have read it, I highly recommend that you check out Fallen Grace by Sadiqa Johnson, because that one was also really good. Honestly, I feel like you can still read Fallen Grace even if you haven't read The House of Eve yet, because the way it picks up, it's just kind of like a short story, but it's more interesting and more enjoyable if you have like that backstory of Bubbles from The House of Eve. So those were all the books that I read this month. I think that was 9. I don't know what it is about February, even though it's the shortest month of the year. It's typically the month that I read the most books in, and I don't know how that works out because it's also my birthday month. So not really sure how I'm always able to find time to read so many books in the month of February. But before we end the vlog, let's go over some of the books that I purchased this month. The first book is My Darkest Prayer by S.A. Cosby. The second book is Perfect Little Lives by Amber and Danielle Brown. This is a sister duo, and both of these books are thrillers. I do think I want to feature them in a video of some sort. I'm still brainstorming that, but 2 thrillers. And then I also have 2 sci-fi novels. So like I said, the Womb City book, I really thought I would enjoy, and I didn't. So now I'm on a hunt to find a sci-fi that I really enjoy. The book that I purchased was The Upper World by Femi Faduba. I really hope I remembered how to say that. But this is a YA novel, and it deals with time travel, I believe. And it's YA. I really love the cover. This book is absolutely stunning. And then we have Binti, the complete trilogy. So these are 3 novellas that were just bound together in one book, which I really wish more publishers and authors would do that when they write like all these separate novellas. I'm less likely to complete a series if I have to go buy more and more books. But if you bind them all together, I'm going to just sit and read this like front to back. So this is also YA, and I'm leaning more towards YA because what got me interested into sci-fi was Out of Body by Nia Davenport. And although that leans more towards mystery and less in sci-fi, it does still have sci-fi elements. And I was really surprised that I enjoyed that book, but it was YA. So I went into this thinking that I would like it just as much, not realizing that maybe it's the YA sci-fi aspect that I'm enjoying. So I'm trying to get back to that to see if maybe that's just my sweet spot and that's where I need to stay is sci-fi. With sci-fi is to just like live in YA. This one has to do more with space travel, I believe, and she goes to like a school, or she's going to a school in space, but on the way there, her ship is attacked and she's the only survivor. So this is more of like a space themed sci-fi, and this is more of like a time travel sci-fi. So we'll see. I'm really excited. Honestly, I'm super excited to read both of these, and these I think I'm just going to try and feature in a video because thrillers are thrillers. I can always enjoy a good thriller. So those were the 4 books that I purchased. Those were the 9 books that I read. I think that's all I need to update you guys on for my monthly wrap up. If you made it to the end of today's video, thank you so much for watching. Please leave this emoji so that I know you made it to the end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much to everyone who has supported my channel so far. It has grown way faster than I thought it would, and I really, really appreciate everyone who takes the time to click, watch, comment, all of those things. I really, truly, genuinely appreciate it. Thank you so much. I will see you guys in my next video.